Well, hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson. Give me a follow on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Please spread the word, hit the like button, all that stuff that we tell you to do for this podcast. And hey, check out my other stuff as well. Got a lot out there. I'm a busy fella. The first half of this podcast, I just kind of wanted to give a step back feel for 2025 offseason thus far. And I'm recording this Thursday. No quarterback news. If there is, I'll record another emergency podcast as soon as possible. But it looks like kind of a holding pattern at the moment. But I will say I do a lot of national work in addition to the Steelers stuff. I'm very Steelers specific, but I've done a national analyst pretty much since I left the Browns. And I will say, well into a week into free agency, and by the way, folks, league year is only like a week old. I mean, the new year is 8 days old. And I have to say, so far, there aren't many teams, and I urge you to go take a look. I mean, I would say the Bears, the Vikings, the Rams, the Patriots, but some of these teams are like the Patriots or the Titans are one of the worst in the league and they have nowhere to go but up. And where I was going with this, I don't think there's that many teams that are really noticeably better than we saw them last in the regular season or when they got eliminated. There really aren't. I mean, this group of free agents, I know a lot of people are a little underwhelmed with the Steelers offseason thus far, but you can't deny that the Steelers are way better at wide receiver. I think they're clearly better at corner. And they lost some pieces, but they weren't foundational pieces. And they are going to get draft picks in return for them a year from now. That's just all I'm saying is it's not a great offseason. I mean, a lot of it is because key free agents are not hitting the market because there's so much money to spend. You know, like, I think I mentioned this before. A year ago, the best corner in the league, Pat Surtain, signed a $24 million a year deal. And we all went, whoa, that's a lot of money for a corner. 2 days ago in Houston, Derek Stingley, who's almost his equal, he's a top 3 corner for sure, signs a $30 million contract a year. 1 year apart, nearly equal players. That's the kind of inflation we're talking about here. And my point is, Stingley doesn't even hit the open market. What would he have got if he's out on the open market? You know, like when Milton Williams, high quality player, up on the rise, you know, goes from the Eagles, just wins the Super Bowl, goes to the team with the most cap space in the league, the Patriots, who I'll get to in a minute, signs a $27 million deal, and that's the prize of free agency. There's not a lot of great players out there to help teams dramatically. And teams like the Chargers that had the second most cap space, I thought, wow, they're going to add a lot. They really haven't. You know, I mean, they kept Khalil Mack. They added Mekhi Becton at guard. They brought back Mike Williams. You know, like, is that their answer? Is their number 2 receiver, Mike Williams, with all that cap space? So I'm urging you as a Steeler fan, first off, to be patient, and I'm going to get to that in a minute here too. But also, this offseason, and frankly, probably including the upcoming draft, which I didn't want to hit too much because we're going to do so much draft breakdown between now and then, just isn't a wonderful offseason to improve. And free agency and cap space now is starting to become way more about keeping your own, you know, draft and develop, keep your own, reward them with big contracts, and then fill in little holes, you know, like, boy, a nice number 2 corner, you know, Slay. Okay, well, use them for a year or whatever, but if you get a good year out of them, cool. You know, I mean, it's just what the league has become. And I like to sometimes take a step back with you guys and talk big picture. So I do another podcast every day, Peacock and Williamson. It's on the Locked On Network. And I just finished recording it. And today was our mailbag. We did a bunch of questions and a lot of questions about the Texans and Patriots. So we had a lot of talk about that. And just mentioned, it doesn't seem like a lot. I know you don't know those teams like you do the Steelers, but Stephon Diggs is visiting the Patriots. And they have all this cap space and they spent almost all of it on defense and they still have a ton. But imagine how much different the Patriots will look if they signed Stephon Diggs, used the 4th pick in the draft on their favorite O-lineman, Membo, put him in at left tackle, and they're rumored to trade for Brandon Ayuk. Like, okay, like all of a sudden the offense has a great-looking young left tackle, Stephon Diggs and Ayuk. They could do that in a heartbeat. I mean, they have so much buying power. Houston, on the other hand, I'm like, man, they're trading away their entire offensive line, Tunsil, etc. Their defense looks awesome, but it's a small move. They signed Cam Robinson today, a 1-year, $12 million deal. I think he's every bit the player Dan Moore or Jalen Moore is that signed $20 million deals. He's going to be the left tackle. All of a sudden, you look at their line, and they're like, oh, this is starting to fall into place. And they have all these draft picks from the Tunsil deal. They're going to reshape their O-line, which is hard to do in an offseason. But the defense looks awesome. And they're going to have, my point is these teams have big picture plans. And especially your Steelers. We know that they don't move super quick like crazy and are not a reactive team. But I just urge you, give it some more time. These pieces, this is 3D chess. These pieces do a lot of different things. And a lot of you responded that way after I had the Malik Harrison podcast a week or two ago or whatever it was. Just saying, yeah, I'm going to miss Landon Roberts. Great Steeler. I would have brought him back. But Harrison kind of fills 2 needs. Thornhill kind of fills 2 needs. And then you get to the draft and like, man, I thought they had like 10 needs and now they only have like 3. And I think you can really feast, So I just want to take a step back. Big picture stuff here. BetOnline is your world's your trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, I want to wrap this up with some DK Metcalf stuff. Now, I urge you again, this is probably 4 or 5 podcasts ago. Go back on the feed if you missed it. Shame on you for 6 weeks. But I really broke down DK Metcalf and used Matt Harmon's reception perception as a huge crutch. And I warned you going into that podcast, some of this you're not going to like what you hear. And frankly, I should have told you this too. Because I've been there, I've done it. When you write a true scouting report on a player, fans don't get a chance to see those things. But when you read one or you write one or you go back and reference them, there's a lot of negative on just about everybody. I mean, these aren't as fun and flashy as SportsCenter highlights or YouTube clips or, boy, all the big plays or boy, my fantasy numbers were great, blah, 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 So there's a lot of negatives. So sometimes that can be eye-opening to you guys because some of the comments were like, oh, great, we just picked up a dude that's not worth anything. What a waste, after hearing that podcast. But I also found some other nuggets that are fantasy related, but I love using fantasy as a tool as well. So last year, Metcalf, he opened the season going over 100 yards in 3 of the first 4 games. And he averaged over 15 fantasy points per game all the way through week 7. That's a ton, folks. I mean, I know most of you play fantasy, but not everyone. If I'm getting 15 points a game out of my wide receiver from weeks 1 to 7, I'm really happy with that guy. Now, week 7 is really important here, though. He suffered a knee injury, which I didn't realize, slipped my mind or whatever, in that week 7 game against Atlanta, and frankly was never the same. So in weeks 1 through 7, he was averaging 8.7 targets per game. Now, he didn't play in week 8, 9, 10. There was a bye week in there, and there was 2 games missed with the knee injury. So he played those games 1 through 7, and he played the games 11 through 18. So there's really a tale of 2 seasons with DK Metcalf. And these numbers just really reflect it. So targets in the first half, those 1 through 7s, 8.7. But 11 through 18, he only averaged 5.9 targets per game. Now, I will preface this by saying I went back and watched the tape, and it looked like he came back too early and was gutting it out. But also by this point, JSN, who's a really good player, had become a target hog for these guys. But they also had no running game whatsoever, and they threw the ball quite a bit. So it's not like there weren't targets and opportunities to go around. But Smith-Njigba, which is the reason they were able to trade Metcalf, had really come on by this point. Really good player. But still, these are stark. Again, targets, 8.7 versus 5.9. Receptions, 5.0 compared to 3.9. Receiving yards per game, in weeks 1 through 7, 81.1. In weeks 11 through 18, 53. We mentioned, fantasy points. 15.1 in weeks 1 through 7, 10.7 in weeks 11 through 18. He was the 13th ranked fantasy quarterback or wide receiver in weeks 1 through 7. In weeks 11 through 18, he was the 42nd ranked fantasy wide receiver. See where I'm going with this? Go back and watch the first 7 games if you have doubts about what Metcalf can bring to this team. If you want to be negative and say the Steelers will never be good, watch the end of the season when he's fighting an injury. It's not as good, Now, staying healthy for 17 games isn't easy, and he's not young, and he's a big body that puts a lot of stress on him, but he doesn't have a long injury history, and I'm no more worried about his injury history than anybody else, but wanted to provide some context for you. All right, everyone, take care. Bye.